livable communities, lovable communities. Put housing where jobs are, put jobs where housing is, walkable streets. And those two departments are at odds, and that has to change. I currently am winning two battles with the Metro and the state of California. One is for the Gerald Desmond Bridge, which is a $1 billion project, which probably doesn't impact any of us here. It's in San Pedro, Long Beach. But the reason it's relevant is because it's a $1 billion project. And when you set a standard on a $1 billion project, you can kind of expect the standard to apply to your curb cut. It's not the other way around. So if we fight all day over the curb cut, we'll never, ever impact the $1 billion projects. The second one I'm winning on is the 405 Sepulveda Pass. And in fact, they're changing the design of the bridge, the Mulholland Bridge there, because we win by invoking simple standards that we have to fight for right now. And one of them, quite simply, is the Complete Streets Act. When you touch something, you have to leave it so that it's good for everybody. That's a law that went into effect on January 1. I shouldn't have to know California state law in order to cross the street, but I do. And in fact, we invoked the Griffith Park land deed in order to walk up the hill. We invoked Los Angeles Municipal Code to park our bikes. We've invoked California state law to ride on Crystal Springs. We shouldn't have to, as people, fight so hard for things that belong to us and are guaranteed to us by law. But in both cases, the Gerald Desmond and the 405 Sepulveda, it was simple ADA compliance that allowed us to win and prevail, which means that now, in both cases, and it should be on all of our streets, they should be good for everybody. The Complete Streets Act says it's good for pedestrians, it's good for cyclists, it's good for those that use mass transit, and it's good for motorists. So the notion that we should be widening our streets is the part of a paradigm that says that your street is a cut-through option for a freeway. And freeway traffic belongs on freeways. And if they're congested, that doesn't mean you should take Canyon. And one of the first issues that brought us to the Hollywood United Neighborhood Council's Transportation Committee was, how do we stop the cut-through traffic? Because they're shortcutting, and pets were getting killed, which meant that a child would be next, and in fact, at Franklin and Canyon, there were some fairly significant collisions occurring because people were shooting through the streets. So the answer to all of this is we've got to have standards we can count on. Our streets belong to us. Cut-through traffic is completely unacceptable. Our streets aren't freeway alternatives. And I have fought and am fighting and will fight for your right to protect your community, our neighborhood, your home, from those that threaten your safety. And that includes the local streets like this one, all the way to the big one on the backside of Griffith Park.
For people who work in Hollywood, we've talked about the importance of proximity of housing. This need is often in tension, as I've been in conversation in the community, with the need for historic preservation and concerns about the character of neighborhoods. A CD4 resident wrote concerning this issue, and he said, given Hollywood Grove Historic Preservation Overlay Zone is in this district, do you support the HPOZ, and how significant do you feel HPOZs are to the future of Los Angeles? So, specifically this, but more generally, the tension between historic preservation and the need for some development for new housing.
So the HPOZ is a historic preservation overlay zone, which would mean that the homes north of Franklin, that entire community would be protected so that Ryan and I couldn't put our money together and go and build some monstrous thing and violate the personality and character of that neighborhood. One of the things that's absolutely charming about our neighborhood is that even on the walk over here, we talk about, well, this church has history. And at one time, there was going to be a radio station on top. But the buildings in our neighborhoods have stories. We had a fundraiser in Los Feliz in a home that had a book written about it. I mean, our homes and our architecture in our neighborhoods are literally rock stars. And I'm always encountering tourists that are wandering around the book looking at a particular architect or particular where history was made. And so there's absolutely every reason in the world to protect the character and personality of our communities and to prevent them from being destroyed or violated. And so in this particular case, the Historic Preservation Overlay Zone is an absolute necessity. It's unfortunate because in many ways you shouldn't have to protect small pockets. We should be able to say the city of LA is a pretty great place. I would hate to see any of it destroyed, especially when it comes to the personality and character of the city of LA, the thing that brings people to town, like the Columbia Square project on Sunset. It was a famous studio, soon to be famous condos. And the tourists that come to town, a pretty significant economic driver, don't come to see our world-famous condos. They come to see where history was made. Hollywood and Vine had a radio station that broadcast from Hollywood and Vine. And so I think it's a shame that we're losing so much of our character and personality, of our history, of our legacy, because it's not protected. So this is necessary. The larger picture is we should be able to protect the city of LA itself. And as for housing, we're actually losing housing stock, like the Gershwin is now empty. At one time it had humans in it. We had that event there. And they're gone. And so in many ways, I think that we're playing we're moving things around, but we're not improving the quality of life. The irony of affordable housing is, when you talk about 59% employment, it's unaffordable. Why? Because people aren't earning a living, and they're not prospering. And as someone who was able to walk to work many years ago, but now can't, because my job has moved to the west side. So Culver City, Santa Monica, or a lot of the post work is in Burbank and Glendale. So our jobs are leaving town, which means that it's tough to live here because there isn't work here. And I say that from first-hand experience. What can we do to make it more affordable in Hollywood? Well, absolutely. We need to improve the economy, bring jobs back to town, and then make sure people are connecting with them so that they have an opportunity to put their skills and education to work.
So I started life off as a woodworker, and I restored old brownstones in Hoboken, New Jersey. And one of the things I think that we learned in Hoboken very early on was that unlike Jersey City to the south and Union City to the north, Hoboken kept its existing housing stock. It's stunningly beautiful. It's not as pretty as Park Slope or Brooklyn Heights, but it's nice. And so we kept those old buildings and we repurposed them. And it was a constant battle in the town to build bigger and newer. And it was easier often to knock the building and build something different. And thank heavens we never did, because that town is one of the most charming, prosperous towns along what's called the Gold Coast. Hoboken got it right. Jersey City botched it up. They lined the waterfront with high-risers. And to the north of Hoboken, they ruined the thing. So, and Stephen is right. It's all about history. You take away the soul of the place, you take away the beautiful woodwork, and you'll never get it back. In Ireland, in the last 15 years, because of their prosperity, they knocked a lot of the old farmers' cottages and built McMansions. And it's just a desperate-looking situation right now, how they ruined that countryside, sadly. By contrast, actually, fair play to Great Britain, they had planning and zoning laws way back, and they protected and preserved their beautiful small towns with their beautiful buildings. And it's a pity that Ireland didn't take a lesson from that. So I like the idea of preserving old buildings. I had to knock, for the most part, the old house that I renovated, the one that we live in Los Feliz, because of the hillside and bolting issues. But we did keep a lot of the existing materials and tried to rebuild it fairly closely to its, original intent. So I love historic stuff. I like the look of it. I like the feel of it. It makes me feel at home. And the notion that we'd knock it down to build something new is incredible. So I like HBOCs, if I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Our last question before a couple of closing statements. In spite of its reputation, Hollywood is economically stratified. This particular neighborhood here, as well as Los Feliz and other parts of CD4, from the very rich to the very poor. How would you ensure, if you were elected, that members of our under-resourced communities and those that advocate with them would have a voice with your council office?
Well, first, if you're a city council person and you're making the median household income in CD4 is around 50 grand. If you're making 180, you're making more than 3 times the median income. You don't get it. That's what happened in France. The king was eating like a king, and the peasants were starving, and that's why they had a revolution. That's an exaggeration, of course. Our leaders need to be making a salary that is closer to the median income, so that they get it, so that they do go to Trader Joe's, so that they do chase a bargain, so that they get what most of the rest of us go through on a daily basis. So first, we hear all this talk about promises, and how we're going to do this and we're going to do that. I'm about leading by example. I would love to make 180 grand. That's a nice chunk of change. But I would be unable, and I mean this sincerely, unable to lead CD4 by making that much more than most people. And I would submit to you, then I would have no idea what they're going through. So that's number one. I came from nothing. I came with $80 in my pocket. I grew up on a farm. I understand what it is not to have a lot, and I understand what it is to save pennies. And so, I just feel I am so utterly, completely qualified to understand what folks are going through on a daily basis, and to understand what it is to do without. And as I said at the Archery Museum, in my closing statement last week, I'll probably not be the councilman who comes up here in the hills of Los Feliz and repaves you on a regular basis. Because you know what, you guys? You don't need it. We're doing pretty well up here. What we need to do is divert our assets and our resources to the parts of this city, and that might even be places that are not in CD4, to help them out. Because frankly, this city, it is shameful how some areas have so much and how some areas have so little. So, there you go. Thanks.
I can assure you that the people in Council District 4 will have a voice in Council District 4's council office. And I say this because I have been and I am a champion for open and transparent governance. And I mentioned that I shouldn't have to know so much about the law, but I invoke the California Brown Act, which is the open meeting law that guarantees you the right to participate in our city government. And I've invoked it at City Hall and won. And it shouldn't require me to teach City Hall about a 50-year-old state law, but it did. Then I went to the DWP Commission, and there are some people here that are concerned with how the DWP is functioning, and went to a meeting and again had to help the city attorney and the DWP Commission understand how the Brown Act requires them to behave. Then a third time at the Police Commission. So I assure you that I have a track record for fighting to make sure that people from all walks have the ability and the opportunity to participate in their government. I think it's a sad state of affairs, like yesterday, that I would have to go to City Council twice to participate in something so simple as our council member's own motion that he didn't show up to actually move forward. So 20 of us showed up for our 60 seconds of glory in public comment to speak to someone who wasn't there. But that's the process that I have been fighting, and that's the process I assure you will end. When you go to City Hall, you don't even use the front door, you use the back door. The front door is kept locked, it's for city staff. But at my father's church, his first church, there's a sign that said, "Your welcome awaits you." That's what we need at City Hall. And that's what I promise you, everybody will have that welcome. The opportunity to participate in a conversation on their own terms, because it's our job to remove obstacles, and sometimes that's simply removing some of the comprehension issues, because I don't understand the ballot measures. We were talking about the ballot measures ahead of time. Business is taking place in a way that we can't understand, and I don't know if it's by design or by simply disaster, but I do assure you that it is our right to participate in our city government, and that includes an open and transparent operation at City Hall, and that includes a door that's always open and a welcome that's always waiting. Thank you.
Mr. Candidates, 3-minute, if they like, closing statement, starting with Mr. Box.
Thank you. I love watching the jumbo show. I'm honored to be here, and I'm grateful for your participation, and I had a good time here tonight. But at the same time, we're talking about some pretty serious issues. A crisis of traffic congestion, a crisis with regards to education, a crisis with regards to our city's budget, and what I would consider to be a crisis of leadership. And so that's why I'm running for city council, because I not only think we can do better, but I'm convinced that we must do better. So on March 8th, we're all going to have an opportunity to go to the polls and to participate in determining the future of Council District 4. And I stand before you as someone who I would offer is up against two very significant opponents. And they are apathy and indifference. There's 300,000 people in Council District 4. Only 10,000 voted last time round. The incumbent was unchallenged. Nobody even cared enough to run. Of the precincts, and there are about 134 precincts, and they're approximately the same size, one of the precincts was won with 20 votes, which means that you could go win a precinct, and you could go get another one. The average precinct only required 63 people to win. And that's what we're dealing with. And I think it's an absolute abdication of responsibility for us not to reach out to others and get them to the polls. So I ask you, if you could get to 5 people and they could each get to 5 people, you personally have set in motion enough voters to go and get a precinct, regardless of who you vote for. But I think one of the greatest things we could do is participate and send a very clear message that we care. I hope you care enough to vote for Stephen Box, but I really hope you care enough to vote, and I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Come on, give it up. My wife had to leave to put the kids to bed, so please, be nice.
She's not here to support you.
Regardless of what happens, Stephen, this is a fantastic exercise. I think you and I together, we have shaken this district up, regardless of what ends up at the end. And this is a great example of democracy, and it will never be the same again, regardless. So it's a good thing. How do I follow that? Stephen, you're such a great speaker. So, I don't do tweeting. I don't do photo ops. I just do things. I would say I'm a progressive who hates waste. So you could call me a Tea Party guy when I hate to see money being wasted, but you could call me the most liberal of Democrats in my compassion for folks who are not doing as well as I. I hate waste, whether it's a waste of our tax dollars, a waste of a time better spent, a waste of a child's future because we failed them. Waste and me don't get on. And I think one of the things that I'm trying to do is to lead by example. We've heard all the promises before. We hear the Republicans talking about it right now. Of course, it turns out they're not really saving any money. They're spending it on the things that they want to spend it on. I'm trying to put my money where my mouth is. But before I even step inside the door at City Hall, I want everyone to understand I'm sacrificing first to myself. This is what we are taught in the Bible, and this is what I want to do at City Hall. Both my own salary, I'll refuse a car. I have a Honda. I'm fine. I don't need a fancy city car. I want to cut our own council staff by half because we need those positions in other agencies, just as Steve was talking about in planning or in street services. And I don't think anyone has any credibility anymore. There's so little trust left. A politician, or don't call me that, a public servant, has got to go in there completely fresh, with complete credibility to be able to say to the folks whom you're asking to cut, I've already cut everything. I've cut my staff, I've cut my salary, I've given up the car. Now I need you to help out a little, cut a little bit on your own. Secondly, we're going to have to go back to the voters, whether we like it or not, because this government has botched everything. We're going to have to ask them for additional taxes. The only way that voters are willing to do that is if they see our government. And that doesn't matter if it is the $2 cappuccino or the $180,000 council salary. If they see that we have cleaned up our house. So I'm looking to clean up our house so that people have trust again in government. And so that we can restore the things that we all hold dear, like public education, like social services, and yes, something as unsexy as street services. My name is Tomas O'Grady, and I'm asking you respectfully for your vote. Thank you.
This concludes our forum. I want to just, before you dash off, just acknowledge a couple of people. Thank you to the candidates for being here tonight. I know this must be a tremendous burden to run for office. I think they'll probably stay by to chat. I would if I were running for office. So they'll probably be here. I'd also like to thank the Hollywood United Neighborhood Council and LA Voice for partnering with us on this, and especially to our volunteers tonight who helped out with the technology and taking care of all the details from welcoming you to making sure the lights were on. A quick shout out to Nathan French, who I get to work with and who really pours his life into this neighborhood selflessly, standing in the back. Thank you, sir. And most of all, as these two gentlemen have said, make sure you go vote and take a handful of people with you. Remind them to vote in this very small, kind of easy to forget about election, but very important to us. Thank you, guys. Good night.